Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast, everyone. I'm Barrett here alongside my wife, Kimberly, for our 10th episode. Today we're delving into a topic that's taken the headlines by storm. Kimberly, what have you got for us today?
Well, Barrett, recently there was quite the statement made by Hillary Clinton in a CNN interview last week with Christine Amanpour. She brought up this term, formal deprogramming, in reference to what she has called the MAGA cult. Now, the word formal got me wondering, is she hinting at some kind of government intervention? Internment camps, re-education comes to mind. Let's take a look.
Yeah, because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how do you do that? Because you said you have to defeat them by...
Well, that's an intense claim, but clearly we have Christine Amanpour laughing at what is not a jovial comment. It really isn't. But this isn't the first time we've been hearing about deprogramming. I recall AOC, who is a Democratic socialist, proposing to the use of taxpayer funds to tackle white supremacism back in 2021, with some interpreting her comments as targeting conservatives and MAGA Republicans. The Democrat Party has a history of rounding up Americans and throwing them in internment camps. Think about President Franklin Roosevelt and his Japanese American camps during World War II. So we do have historical precedent for what Hillary Clinton is saying.
Right, and not to forget Katie Couric, who has just recently announced her progressive position. Shocker. She pondered on how to deprogram those dedicated to Trump back in 2021 on Bill Maher's show. There seems to be this narrative being constructed that all Trump supporters need to be corrected in some way.
It's an alarming sentiment, especially when looking back how President Biden characterized the Republicans in his speech in Philadelphia in 2022. Words like extremists, threatens the republic were thrown around, and do you remember the backdrop of that imagery during his speech was intense?
Seemed prophetic.
Yeah, his use of blood red colors in the U.S. Marine Corps as a prop made it seem as though he was going to attack conservatives with the military.
With the 2024 elections just on the horizon, there's a new twist. Just this week, Newsweek reported that the FBI has created a category to monitor and counter, termed as Donald Trump's army of MAGA followers. This follows the FBI task force created to target the Catholic Church and its followers. Catholic Americans.
Yeah, that's cool. Targeting individual Americans for FBI surveillance. That's not scary at all. Of course, the FBI director said that was a misunderstanding, but there seems to be a lot of misunderstandings that the FBI is doing, including the letter that was sent and wanted to declare U.S. American parents as domestic terrorists. So we're starting to make up a lot of mistakes, but this feels just kind of familiar, doesn't it? Let's take a trip down memory lane to Mao's China, pre-Cultural Revolution. Remember the Let 100 Flowers Bloom campaign?
Absolutely. Mao invited the public, especially intellectuals, to voice their opinions. However, when they did, many were labeled as rightist for their perspectives. This campaign swiftly shifted to the anti-rightist movement. What's concerning is that many of these so-called rightists were silenced, persecuted, and even sent to thought reform camps.
I.e. deprogramming?
Yeah, also reminds me of the camps of Vietnam and Russia kidnapping Ukrainian children to put them in rooms and
to hate Ukraine
and show propaganda nonstop.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Mark Twain's famous quote of history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And, that's just...
And I don't think we're that original as human beings.
No, I really don't either. But it's terrifying how quickly expressing one's views becomes a dangerous act. In fact, what what is the criteria, or what is the threshold that you disagreeing with somebody now becomes a dangerous act, and it's scary.
How many people get canceled on social media?
Yeah,
these
I mean,
days?
you say one thing and you meant it in a harmless way, and all of a sudden you're canceled. But this methods used to deprogram these individuals back then are haunting. Hard labor, political re-education, and constant self-criticism. Almost kind of like apologizing now by being born with white skin sessions in these these sessions where even young children with white skin are placed on a stool, and all of the children of color walk by and slap the white-skinned child as to show that this is some way fixing some type of oppression. This all builds on each other, and it starts with dangerous rhetoric, like what Hillary Clinton said.
And this term deprogramming, isn't it ironic? It implies an attempt to overwrite existing beliefs and values. One could argue this is already happening with the influences of schools, universities, and media.
An Axios.com article earlier last year brought up the challenges of deprogramming America's extremists. I mean, so we're starting to see this trend. Mm-hmm. The proposed measures included monitoring online spaces, having a national hotline, and even keeping these extremists out of key institutions. Now, this is oddly and very scarily similar to the social credit score that is currently being implemented. It's been over the past few years, but currently being implemented in China. So you have these social credit scores, and your neighbors and friends and family can report you and start to degrade your score. And if your score falls below a certain threshold, your access to shopping, food, government jobs becomes lessened and lessened. And so it's a way for society itself to keep tabs on you and then report you. And then oddly enough, your score goes up if you are reporting people. So it becomes in the benefit of the people that are doing the reporting to lie, cheat, steal in order to increase your score. And that's just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Well, I read a Vanity Fair piece last year which discussed the challenges in deprogramming Trump supporters. What is interesting is that the approach suggested mimics some techniques used during Mao's regime in China.
And again, it's going to be a common theme you're going to hear from me. This is just a slippery slope. Reflecting back on China, those labeled as rightists soon recognized the harsh nature of communism. Yet a few years later, a new generation, the Red Guards, emerged, embodying the values instilled through state-sponsored education.
And it poses the question, what's at stake here in America? Is it about preserving traditional American values? Or is there a pivot towards progressive ideologies? It's truly a battle for the minds and hearts of the American people.
So interesting, I met both Hillary Clinton and Christine Amanpour at different times in Baghdad and Iraq when I was a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. This is during the initial invasion in 2003. Amanpour came in and listened to a battle update brief. It's called a bub. And there's two a day. There's one in the morning bub, and the afternoon bub. And ultimately what happens in this brigade bub is all of the activities that had occurred during the day were being briefed to the incoming shift. So oftentimes there was a night shift and a day shift. The brigade commander and the brigade operations officer and executive officer and all the staff all had opportunities to speak, usually started with the S1 or the human resources officer, if you will, the personnel officer. And that person would talk about all of the casualties, both killed in action and wounded in action, and where their status was being evacuated to Germany and then on into the United States. Incoming personnel that we had that to replace those losses, the status of how many body bags we had on hand in order to make sure that we were able to handle the KIAs. And it really, so the S1 is going on and talking about all this stuff. The S2 is the intelligence officer, and the intelligence officer is talking about what the enemy is doing on the battlefield, what what type of attacks are occurring most, whether it's roadside bombs or RPG attacks or small arms fire. And we're trying to do some predictive analysis in trying to find when these attacks occur and what direction and what locations are coming up. And you can use a time analysis wheel to look and see what days of the week are higher on attacks, what time during the day the attacks are happening. And again, just doing intelligence on what the movement of enemy forces is throughout the battlefield. So that's what the intelligence. So they're briefing all of those things, and then you have the S3 or the operations officer. And that person is going and talking about all of the the results of past operations, and of course we're talking about recent, like the previous day's operations, operations that are coming up, including future operations. And this is moving a lot of men, weapons, and equipment all throughout the battlefield, conducting all these operations during the initial invasion, in while we were in Baghdad. Now, obviously, we had broken apart and were in different forward operating bases. But still, we're still conducting combat operations every single day, whether it be patrols, whether it be direct action against bomb-making facilities and things like that. And then you go to the S4. And the S4 is the supply officer, the logistics officer, and talking about all the logistics that's going on in order to move all this men, weapons, and equipment around the battlefield, and what spare parts we had, what levels of ammunition that we had. And so it's a very, very important job. And then you're getting into the S5, which is the civil affairs. Then even the JAG, the Judge Advocate Group attorney, would brief and say the disposition of if we accidentally bombed someone's house and somebody's property was destroyed, we would have to go through the Baghdad courts in order to pay money to that particular family. So even he had a briefing. But then the brigade chaplain gets to lead the brigade staff in a prayer, and this brigade chaplain, he was an amazing individual, absolutely amazing individual. He was a former infantry officer and paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, and made it to captain, and actually fought in Desert Storm. So he had a combat infantryman's badge, and then he got the calling to go be a man of God. And so he left and went to seminary and came back into the military as a chaplain. And he was a big individual, big bald head, big meaty. Everybody called him the grappling chaplain. And he would do. He was big into jiu-jitsu, and he'd be more than happy to roll with you. So he was about 6'3", maybe 230. I mean, he was a big man. Just supremely fit. So he led the just like he always did in every bub, into a prayer. And Christine Amanpour was visibly upset. She had been taking notes throughout the entire battle update brief, but she was visibly just upset. And so when the bub concluded, and we all went to go do our jobs, she went and accosted the chaplain and said, "How dare you lead these men and women in a Christian prayer? And why did you think that you would be able to do that? What if there was somebody here that didn't want to pray?" And the chaplain looked at her and said, "That was your takeaway?"
That, we are in a war zone.
Yeah, we're in a war.
If you're going to pray, this is time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and he's like, that's your takeaway? The S1 briefed how many men we've lost and women that we've lost that are en route
Not
to
a
Germany.
comment, right?
The S2 talked about military, the insurgencies and what they're doing and what type of attacks they're planning and what type of attacks that they, what time we think they're going to start attacking things to get those trends. The S3 is talking about combat operations. The S4 is talking about resupply and all the ammunition that we're going through. And the takeaway was the prayer.
Do you think God had to bite his tongue before, like, just to keep himself from throwing that lightning bolt right there?
Or I don't know. God probably held the chaplain in place so the grappling chaplain wouldn't put her in the hucklebuck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, honestly, I mean, it absolutely just I could not believe it, and I was there for that when she went and accosted him, and he just said that was your takeaway out of all of the classified information that you just got. The priority was to accost the chaplain for leading a Christian prayer, and his response is we're all Christians here. We're all Christians here, and it was an absolutely just mind-boggling that was what her trigger was. Good for her. She's won a lot of awards, but I've seen her for real, and not impressed. Just not impressed. But also, I got a chance to meet Hillary Clinton during that same combat deployment. And this is when she was a U.S. senator. And congressional delegations or CODELs are named after the senior congressional or whether it's a representative or whether it's a senator, but it's named after the senior person. In this particular instance, Harry Reid was the senior senator, and so it was the Reid CODEL, and Hillary Clinton was with him, and so anyway, here we are in Baghdad, Iraq, in 2003, and she directed. She I guess doesn't like the military, but she directed that all of us had to remove the bolts out of our rifles. Again, this is 2003 in Baghdad, 2003. Initial invasion had been fighting uniformed Iraqi soldiers who capitulated, and now finding an insurgency, and we're on FOB Falcon, or Forward Operating Base Falcon, in southern Baghdad, and we were directed that we had to remove the bolts out of our rifles to make them non-mission capable, so that Hillary felt safe around the soldiers, that we wouldn't shoot her. So here's her vanity. These people are out to get me, and the enemy is out to get us. So we can't defend her or Senator Reid, if we're attacked. And that just, that's my live story about meeting Hillary Clinton, and again, not impressed.
Worldview flipped upside down.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely absurd. She asked stupid questions. Now, maybe it's because she was deferring to Senator Reid, since he was the leader of the congressional delegation. I can't tell you what they talked about behind closed doors, meaning the senators. I had full access, during the briefings that the brigade commander did. But it's the same thing. We did the same briefings to General Abizaid, who was the CENTCOM commander, and who was a 4-star general. And but anyway, those are my stories of meeting those people real life, and not impressed. I'll just be honest. But I still can't believe that the Democrats are taking this position on reprogramming conservatives, as it leads down a very destructive path.
Yeah, there's a saying, I believe it's in relation to the Holocaust of the Jews in Germany. And I apologize if I butcher it, but first they came for the gypsies. I wasn't a gypsy. Then they came for the communist. I wasn't a communist.
And I said nothing.
And I said nothing. And then eventually they came for me, and there was no one left to fight. And so, when you're considering people who think differently than you and you want to exterminate them, maybe think, okay, let's start that slippery slope. One day it'll be so-and-so. It'll be people with red hair. The next day it'll be people with brown hair. The next day it'll be people with blue eyes. The next day it'll be people that are short. Eventually you're going to fall into the bucket.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
well, guys, that's it for this segment. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.